Thursday night, let's look at this. The Thanksgiving slate for 2022. Actually last year we had a couple of really good games on Thanksgiving. We had the Bears and the Lions going in a tight one. We had the Raiders with that overtime win over the Cowboys, and then the Bills just destroying the Saints in the late game, which is almost kind of what you want in the third game of the night, just so that you know that you're full of food, you've had a few drinks, and you can just fall asleep on the sofa. I think we've got three really intriguing ties coming up, and I wouldn't have necessarily thought that if I'd looked 4 weeks ago and gone Bills at Lions in the opening game, 5:30. The Lions, obviously a tradition that they play in this. They've got 83 Thanksgiving games, and you kind of thought to yourself, this could be an absolute demolition. And then the Lions win 3 on the bounce, kicking off with that victory over the Packers, that tight one with the Bears, and then beating a 7-2 Giants this past weekend. And the Bills, prior to their win this past weekend over the Browns, had been on a little bit of a wobble, and suddenly this looks, Simon, like a little bit of a frisky game.
Yeah, I think it's a really good slate, all 3 games, like you say. I think the Lions deserve a mention. The fact that they won 3 games in a row for the first time since about 1826. Which
and two road games in a row since in their existence, pretty much as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, they played the Dolphins the week before they won their first these 3 games, and played it really close, and were unlucky not to win that game, really. So it seems to be coming into. I mean, it's a very interesting one for Dan Campbell and for Brad Holmes, in that 3 weeks ago you're in a situation where you're potentially vying for the right to get hold of Bryce Young, the Alabama quarterback. Now all of a sudden you might be picking in the middle of the draft. Jared Goff's playing well. They got an offense that can pretty much live with anybody. And since that Miami game, and since the sort of threat of Aaron Glenn losing his job, I know that the secondary coach lost his job. They've tightened things up. Kirby Joseph, the rookie, playing brilliantly on the back end. Jeff Okudah finally sort of beginning to show some of that form and getting good performances now from Aiden Hutchinson. A couple of picks, the pick against the Packers, the pick at the weekend against Daniel Jones. And they're playing really well. They're playing solid special teams. They're playing really well on offense. They've got one of the best offensive lines in the business, with those 2 big tackles and Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell. And Jared Goff's sort of playing turnover-free football. And I think most people really enjoyed what they saw from the Lions on Hard Knocks. And I think it'll be an interesting game against Buffalo. I don't think I think it'll be high scoring. I think they'll probably have a job stopping the Bills when push comes to shove, in terms of the skilled position players with Davis and Stephon Diggs and the big tight end, etc. But I think it'll be an entertaining kickoff to the Thanksgiving action.
I think it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it, because you've got two offenses that have got playmakers all over the place. They're putting up points all over the place as well. It's a shorter week. It's going to be magnificent seeing these 2 teams going up against each other. And as Simon said, it's not just playmakers on the offense, there's defenses as well. The defense has some real superstars. Finally, we've got a Thanksgiving game involving Detroit for the first time since about 1863.
Detroit's one of those games. We've been to Detroit, but I've certainly not been to the stadium. But it feels like there's going to be a really good atmosphere in there on Thursday night as well.
Yeah,
actually something to cheer about. Because I just like to make the point that I said before the season that I thought Detroit would be one of the wildcard teams, and all of a sudden, that in a bad NFC, they're not that far out of wildcard contention. And if they beat the Bills, then all bets might be off.
People keep saying this bad NFC thing, and I believe that was the truth going into the season. But I am starting to believe there are at least 4 teams in the NFC that are good enough to compete, and we'll talk about at least one of them coming up with this Thursday night football. But I think the Bucs are back on the ascendancy. We talked about the Niners a lot on this podcast. The Vikings will have to see how they do on Thursday after a demolition this past weekend.
The Cowboys
and the Cowboys coming out of the NFC. We'll get on to Cowboys. I'm just gonna, I'm delighted that you did mention Aiden Hutchinson. He was brilliant this past weekend again, got the fumble recovery as well as the interception. And, okay, you've got a couple of guys who are so stand and far away in Tariq Woolen and Sauce Gardner in that kind of defensive rookie of the year campaign. But Aiden Hutchinson has been, certainly in recent weeks, having a season which could rival those. I just wanted a bit of, by the way, Olly Hunter logistics chat. hashtag is brand new thing. The Bills, of course, played at Ford Field this past weekend because of the snow game. They were the nominated home game. They used the road dressing rooms and all of the road facilities and the road bench so that they could essentially practice for Thursday night and know exactly where they needed to be and everying else. And I kind of love that.
That's
really
heavy logistics.
Nerdy football way. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
That's such heavy logistics. We need to get accustomed and familiar with the away dressing room. Okay, whatever. Yeah, all right. I love it. Love it.
The Bills are an interesting one for me because, at 7-1, we thought they were going to absolutely wreck the AFC and were looking absolutely unreal. I thought in the first half against the Browns, they were pretty abysmal. Like they came in and they had that kind of 13-10 advantage. It was a game they were expected to win. They were like 9.5-point favorites prior to it moving to a dome, and it moved kind of towards a touchdown by that point. But prior to that touchdown drive to end the half, where Stephon Diggs, who hadn't seen a target yet in that game, and then was over on the touchline remonstrating with every coach in the world before he managed to get himself the touchdown grab. And maybe that was the real catalyst for them. But second half, they just started to regain a bit of identity. Their running attack started to come together. I thought Singletary and Cook both rushing for 86 yards was really significant for them. Like, I don't know. The second half made it feel like maybe the wobble was over, but it also makes me think that they are there for the taking potentially.
Yeah, I do wonder about that running game, though, Will. And it does feel like there's a sort of superhuman pressure on Josh Allen. Look, the game against the Vikings was so unique, so weird. They were beaten by, use the word again, but a superhuman performance by Justin Jefferson in terms of what he was able to do. But, they kind of gave the ball away with the late fumble at the end. Gave the game away with a late fumble at the end and stuff. And I don't think the Vikings on any given Sunday really could match up with the Bills. I was just surprised that they gave that game away. I do think it happens to all really good teams at a point in the season. It's happening to the Eagles currently. It's hard to keep up that momentum for 17, 18 weeks of the season. The Bills really built their, brick wall of their season early on in September and early October. Yep, they're taking a few bullets now, but who's going to want to go to Orchard Park in January, late January in the playoffs? There's not a single team in the AFC that's going to want to do that, because they've got an absolute mutant at quarterback. They've got a solid offensive line. They've got great receiving talent. They're really good on defense. They can get home with 4. They've got Matt Milano, who's just one of the most, probably arguably the most underrated player in the league. They've got great safeties. I know Mike Hyde's out for the year, but Jordan Poyer's back, and they're bringing Tre'Davious White back to, and they've got a great kicking game in Tyler Bass, and they're brilliantly coached. This is not a team that's going anywhere. Yeah, they've had a little dip in performance, but I don't think it's to me, this is a blip on the radar that happens to all good teams. And we've just seen it with the Eagles. Really last week, they lost their first game. They could have lost to Indy on Sunday. The Bills are going to be there or thereabouts when it comes to the final reckoning. And if it's, Bills at Chiefs in the final game of the season in terms of the AFC Championship, that's not going to be a shock to anybody.
I don't think anyone would complain apart from Dolphins fans either. All the neutrals would like that repeat of the AFC Championship game last time around. But I mean,
it wasn't even the championship game, don't forget, because the
wasn't
Bengals were there. It was the AFC divisional round game. Yeah, because the Bengals went to the Super Bowl, mate.
Oh yeah, they did. Completely forgot about that. But you know what I mean. It had the vibes of being a championship game. I think the Dolphins will have something to say about it, though. They'll have something.
I think the Bengals might have something to say about it as well. Quite frankly, I don't think the Bengals are going anywhere, or the Ravens. In fact, they're
Ravens have stuttered.
Playing. Yeah, but again, they're 7-3. That's not a massive stutter. I don't,
Yeah.
Well, although I haven't heard from many of those Cincinnati fans that slagged us off at the start of the season with the, and you look at the Ravens rest of the season versus the Bengals. I mean, the Bengals have got an incredibly difficult schedule, whereas the Ravens are just playing, junior varsity teams for the rest of the year. So the Ravens, I think, will comfortably win that division, and it'll be tough for the Bengals to get in, but they're a very good team, and Joe Burrow has been fantastic without Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins stepped up. I mean, he was huge on Sunday against the Steelers. So
Chase off the old crutches as well as a little bit of a this point in the season trope for you. So he is coming back. Oh, it's going to be fun. I'm really excited for the rest of this season. I'm really excited for the rest of this Thanksgiving slate. Giants at Cowboys is a fascinating one to me. The Cowboys have lost 4 of their last 5 on Thanksgiving, and it tends to be one of those real kind of turning point of the season games for them, where they either prove to be a contender or more often than not. The Giants coming into this game with the same record at 7-3, but having just lost to that Lions team that, yes, we've been effusive of, but I don't know. When you look at the coach of the year conversation at the moment, Brian Daboll very much up there. We'll give Mike McDaniels flowers, of course. Nick Sirianni, maybe before being beaten 40-3, Kevin O'Connell would have been in that conversation as well. But the reason Daboll's in there is because they've not been a great football team, but have got to 7-3. And I've got a feeling that in Dallas, that's just going to tell this weekend. Ollie.
Yeah, Dallas are just flying at the moment, aren't they? They were unlucky to lose against a Green Bay side. They kind of just the wheels came off, but then just put an absolute spanking on the Vikings in every facet. 7 sacks on Kirk Cousins, and I know the Vikings' offensive line isn't that good, but I think that just shows. And it was 5 different players that got those 7 sacks. I think it just shows the strength and depth on that defense. And then when your defense is so dominant, it allows for Tony Pollard, Zeke Elliott, who's back. CeeDee Lamb had a quieter game, but as did Dalton Schultz, but other players step up. And just the threat, the dual threat of those 2 runners, Tony Pollard's he's overtaken Zeke in a lot of people's eyes. And then Zeke does the stuff that he needs to do within that 5-yard line. But Thanksgiving at the AT&T, if anyone has got the chance to do it, I've done it once. They played Washington back in a former iteration of that franchise. It's an amazing experience. It's an incredible stadium, and I'd implore anyone if they get the chance to go and do a Thanksgiving game, make sure it's the Dallas one, because it's just a real experience.
Dallas is so dangerous, aren't they?
He went to watch a Dallas-Boston Braves game in 1936. That's what Ollie's talking about.
Yeah,
that's it. Iteration of that franchise.
Dallas is so dangerous, though, aren't they? Because they retained Dan Quinn, which was such a big thing, and what it's done, quite apart from anything, has meant that Mike McCarthy can just focus on the offense really and give Kellen Moore a hand, because you've really got a guy who was a quarter away from winning the Super Bowl in Dan Quinn running that defense. They've got, we talk about Josh Allen as a mutant. They have got, this is hyperbole, but they've got one of the best defensive players I've seen since Lawrence Taylor in Micah Parsons, and I was talking about there's a Dallas, I'm in a studio here, and there's a Dallas fan who's a big Dallas fan who's in the studio, and we were talking about it earlier on, and we were saying, if you were just to line him up and just rush the quarterback every single snap, he would get 20, 25 sacks in a season. He's that good, and he's almost a victim of his own ridiculous talent, because, he can get sideline to sideline. He's not lazy. You see him running 30, 40 yards down the field. He's just such a phenomenal athlete. But again, just what you need in December and January is they have the ability to get home with 4 or with 5 if you rush Parsons. I do worry about them a little bit on the back end, but they're so good. He's so good. You're getting Lawrence obviously chipping in, Armstrong's chipping in. The guy they got for whose name completely escapes me, but was drafted by the Jaguars in the Dante Fowler is chipping in with sacks. And then offensively, I just think the decision just to move, Tony Pollard into that, sort of not necessarily a starting role, but just into that more diversified role, getting him more touches, not just on special teams, not just manufacturing touches for him, I think was such a smart move, because very much like Christian McCaffrey in San Francisco, you can line him up out wide, you can put him in the slot, you can run him in motion, you can give him the ball in jet motion, you can hand the ball off to him inside, outside. He's tough, he's quick, he's got great vision, he's got outstanding hands. You don't want to cover him one-on-one on an angle route or a two-way go out the backfield. He's such a massive threat, and obviously, keeping Dak healthy. Tyron Smith's been out, but the rookie Tyler Smith has played really well at left tackle. Zach Martin is, another Hall of Famer currently playing. There's a few of those out and about in the league at the moment. The line sort of gelling together, and I think the Cowboys are a hugely dangerous out for anybody in the. You do not want to be going to Dallas in the playoffs. I just think they are, because that defense is just so special.
Does OBJ go there, Will, Gavin?
I mean, I would, wouldn't you, Will?
Yeah. 100%. Like, he even tweeted after the game this weekend saying, like, yeah, about how they went off against those Vikings in that 43 win. Like, it makes total sense, and it's kind of terrifying to think of the idea, because what has really struck me over recent weeks, and look, you gave Tony Pollard his flowers, and rightly so, and the guy has established himself as the lead back. And I think this game very early on was at 3-3, and he had that drive where he had the 18-yard run followed by the 20-yard run, and it just seemed to drag that Dallas offense forwards and then turn them. That just from there on out, they were a complete juggernaut. And his open field speed and the guy he makes people miss, I love him. I think he's absolutely brilliant. But I thought Dalton Schultz was excellent again in this game, despite not seeing the ball as much. Great blocking, availability when he needed him. But CeeDee Lamb, like, only 4 or 5 weeks ago, people were going, he doesn't really look like a number one. He doesn't really look like a guy who is going to be able to that team. They need an Odell Beckham or someone. Actually, CeeDee Lamb, in terms of just how powerful he is and some of the catches that he makes, that sideline grab where Dak threw it miles outside of the sideline was unreal.
Yeah, he's just he's sort of damned by the fact that he was taken 17th and Justin Jefferson went 21st, and Jefferson is a top 3 receiver in the league, and Lamb came out with such high hopes, and not that he hasn't necessarily fulfilled them, but you go back and look at running wide open against those sort of wide open Big 12 defenses, which he was doing at Oklahoma, whereas you go back and look at Jefferson and what he brought to the table was not necessarily the big plays that you'd seen in terms of the flash plays that CD was having with the yards after the catch and those sorts of things, and what it seemed like he was just invariably running wide open on every single play. But what Jefferson was doing was running routes like a proper NFL receiver, and he was doing it against NFL talent at cornerback. You look at Patrick Surtain, you look at JC Horn, both first round picks of the Broncos and the Panthers, but across the board in the SEC, with Martin Emerson at Mississippi State, all of those guys in terms of the SEC corners that he was going up against and getting open because of his unique skill set as a route runner, quite apart from his ridiculous hands, his body control, all of those other things. It's just the route running ability that just separates him.
I do think, Odell Beckham, even when he comes back in, is going to take 3 weeks to get up to speed. And he might appear rotationally.
It's a playoff signing.
Yeah, I agree. I think he comes in over the next couple of weeks and starts to show out maybe week 16, 17, 18, around there potentially. I think the thing is that with CeeDee Lamb's emergence over the last 4 weeks, you look back at that Rams offense last year and the role he played versus Cooper Kupp, and they had Van Jefferson and others who are making big plays. Like, that's the role he needs to fill, not like a straight up number one. You're going to have to excuse me. I am struggling with my throat really badly. I apologize. I'm going to mute again, Ollie.
It's fine, and Simon Clancy's dropped off. But
I've had this throat and this cold thing all weekend, so I apologize to those listening to listen to my grossness.
No, but you're right. You mentioned Cooper Kupp in there, briefly there. What's gone on with the LA Rams? Just they are.
We're doing a Thanksgiving preview, Ollie.
I know, but you mentioned it, and it made me think about it. How bad?
They are going to be the first team since the 2003 Tampa Bay Buccaneers to have a losing record the season after a Super Bowl.
It's made me wonder how much the Sean McVay leaving has really affected the locker room, because it does feel to me like that had a massive impact on whether or not what was just going on, because it felt like a lot of the team just dialed out in terms of McVay saying, I'm going to go and work in TV and I'm going to give up, coupled with the sort of Aaron Donald retirement thing. I think that had a really negative effect on but also the flip side of that is, that whole sort of, and excuse my French, but the fuck them picks thing, was absolutely hugely successful to win a Super Bowl. Yeah. But actually what it means is that, you have to hit on every single late round pick, and they've done a very good job of that. But at some point the rubber meets the road in terms of you can't continue to pay free agents. You have to develop your own players in this league, and they just haven't been able to do it as consistently as you'd like to see. And some of those players that they banked on in the later rounds just haven't kind of come through. And when you're missing on a Cam Akers and you're missing on a couple of other guys, that does have a knock-on effect. I think that's come home to roost.
I am going to say that looking at this Thanksgiving game, a couple of teams have run on the Cowboys incredibly well this year. Washington did, Tampa Bay. Like, there have been teams that have beaten them on the ground and been good at that. And so I think the Giants, the way that they win this game is they ride Saquon Barkley like they did 2 weeks ago. I think the problem is if you give a guy 30 to 35 touches. You can't just keep doing that week in, week out. And I think almost with a Thursday night tilt in their sights and a Lions team they thought maybe they would beat without needing to go to Saquon Barkley as much. They just didn't use him in the same way, and Daniel Jones ends up turning the ball over left, right, and center. So I think I fancy the Giants to keep it maybe closer than the Vikings did, which is going out on a limb there, Will. Because turning our attention to that final game of the night, two of the weirder teams coming into this week in the 120 game, because you've got Bill Belichick's bringing the Patriots into this game. First time they played on Thanksgiving since 2012, which was the Mark Sanchez butt fumble game. Very much on a defense led by Matthew Judon that had been incredibly impressive, but couldn't put up more than 3 points on offense against the Jets. Jets, good defense, but there was all this talk about, Zach Wilson is terrible this weekend. The play calling and to an extent Mac Jones' performance was not good enough. Like, the play calling is what it falls on for the New England Patriots. But Mac Jones, I went back and watched it after hearing Matt Sherry tell me he played really well, and there were at least 3 sacks in that game where I'm looking at and going, even a semi-mobile quarterback. And it doesn't need to be, I'm not saying it needs to be Jalen Hurts. It doesn't need to be somebody like who has got the legs and able to escape and turn it into a 20-yard gain. Just somebody with a bit of pocket presence who knows when to step up, when to move out, would have avoided at least 3 of those sacks. And that's where the concern comes for me, is he's so immobile. Yeah, I don't know. Going up against a Vikings team who got just an absolute whooping this past weekend, it's neither of these teams coming into this one impressive, but one of them coming in off a win and just off the AFC playoff picture. So I find this one really, really difficult to call.
The thing I'm really looking forward to seeing is Judon up against that Vikings offensive line that allowed 7 sacks, multiple QB pressures and hits and the like. That's one of the matchups that I'm really looking forward to seeing. But you're right. They're weird teams, and Bill Belichick's being weird this year. It's like a weird year for Bill Belichick, because you'd expect him to get more out of players, and what he's done throughout his entire career is get more out of players, and teams are the sum of their parts rather than the individuals, and that's just not happening. Hasn't happened for the entirety of this season. The whole thing between Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones was bizarre, and that surely hasn't helped with the camaraderie and how certain players will feel about their quarterback. I just find the New England Patriots and what's going on there just weird, and I can't really put my finger on it, but there's something odd going on.
Yeah, his regression surely is down to, because he certainly did play well in stints last year and doing what the offense, he wasn't, let's not mistake, he wasn't Patrick Mahomes back there, but he was consistently keeping the ball moving. He was making big throws in big moments. He was doing exactly what he was asked to do, and he was doing it competently, more than competently at times. But it can't help that, a former Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator is calling the offensive plays. That seems to be, it's absolutely mad, quite frankly. And, I've seen a couple of their games this season. The play calling has just been beyond woeful. And so I certainly don't think that helps. I think, Ollie, you make a really good point there about the Bailey Zappi stuff going back and forth. That didn't help either. It kind of helped your confidence as a second-year quarterback. It doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you played, doesn't matter what you did as a rookie, doesn't matter the fact that, you almost won a national championship at Alabama, et cetera, et cetera. The fact that you're essentially booed off the field, in that game, and when Bailey Zappi comes out, he's applauded and people are shouting his name, and you're like, what have you done for me lately, kind of thing. And then Zappi comes out and throws 2 touchdowns on the first 2 drives or whatever it is, and the crowd goes wild. That that has to sting a little bit for Mac Jones. I think the interesting thing, you made a great point there with the Patriots defense with Christian Darrisaw, second concussion in 8 days. I very much doubt he'll be playing on a short week at left tackle for the Vikings. So that's going to really, open things up in terms of Matthew Judon, who's having a defensive player of the year type season. This one's a tough one to call. I think the Vikings aren't as good as their record shows. They won a lot of close games, and you can only beat what's in front of you, and they've done that. But I just and I don't think, whilst I don't think Sunday was a true reflection of their ability, I don't think when push comes to shove, they're a team that you think, yeah, the Vikings are going to go to the Super Bowl. I do think, however, on a short week at home, having been spanked 40-3 or whatever it was, that they're just going to come back and they've got a point to prove on national television. That they are not going to want to lose again. And really sort of fall back into the pack a little bit in the NFC in terms of, because they were in a position of potentially getting the number 1 seed, and now it's, and if the Bills winning that, if the Lions winning that early game, I'm not saying the Lions are going to catch the Vikings, but it starts to put a little bit of pressure on the Vikings if they, they flame out again against the Patriots. I just can't see it. I think, as much as the Patriots have got so much to play for in a crowded AFC, I think the Vikings will win that one.
You mentioned the close game thing, winning 7 games by a single score of their 8, 4 of those by a field goal or fewer. And they went on that 7-game winning streak, and they rode their luck to an extent, and they're 4 games ahead of the Lions and Packers in the NFC North. So they're feeling themselves anyway. Turnovers have been kind of massive for them, 4th in the NFL in turnover differential. And so, Mac Jones will need to protect the ball in a big way. And actually, that game got away from them horribly this weekend, but actually, Zadarius Smith's been playing really well this year. Their front's been really good overall. I think they played brilliantly when they were here in London, getting to watch them in the flesh and getting pressure, admittedly, on Andy Dalton. But that's the problem. We keep having to caveat. It's like Patriots have had back-to-back 3-point games on defense. That is ridiculous. But it was against the Colts in the last game for Frank Reich and a Zach Wilson-led Jets team who just couldn't put anything together, and their own coaching staff are throwing the quarterback under the bus at this point. But 2.1 yards per play, 44 yards through the air, 103 total yards. I don't care if you're playing a peewee football team. Those are ridiculous stats for a defense to achieve. And Matthew Judon's 13 sacks this year, 2.5 ahead of everyone else in the NFL. And admittedly, he's picked up those kind of big multi-sack games, the Colts, the Bears, where he's kind of really gone off. But I kind of fancy the Patriots just because I like that unit so much. I can't see the Vikings can't be as bad as they were this weekend. That just got away from them. It was just bizarre.
I mean, the Vikings played the Dolphins in Miami and were atrocious, and they only really won the game because it was a combination of Skylar Thompson and Teddy Bridgewater, because it was one of the games that Tua wasn't playing, and they really only won the game on a late Dalvin Cook long touchdown run on a 3rd and 1 or a 4th and 1. Again, I think if Tua was playing, that game isn't close. I mean, Miami had so many opportunities that they wasted, and at that point, I just thought this Vikings team aren't very good, and I think that's kind of borne out a little bit in terms of the games they've won, whether that was in London or whatever, in terms of just getting across the line. And really, their only big win of the season came against the Packers in the opening game, where the Packers, didn't play very well. Had the big kind of letdown with the long touchdown pass that Christian Watson dropped on their first offensive drive, which I probably would have made that a very different game. So, Vikings fans are probably going to be hating us as much as Cardinals fans do, but and Bengals fans. But I'm just not sold on it. That's a great team.
It is amazing, Ollie, as I throw to you, that we talk about the NFC contenders and everyone's talking about the Cowboys right now, the 49ers right now, the Bucks resurgence off their back-to-back wins. The team in the number 1 seed are the Vikings. They are
nuts, isn't it? After losing 40-3, and they have a -2 point differential despite being 8-2. It's nuts, isn't it? A couple of little kit watchy aspects I'm looking forward to for this Thanksgiving.
Here we go.
But firstly, props to Matthew Judon for always wearing the bright red arm sleeves things. You can spot him a mile and off. I love it. # kit watch. The Cowboys are going to be wearing, for the first time in a decade, their throwback uniforms, which is the black. The white helmet with the lone blue star. They've got the blue shirt with the white sleeves, white pants. It's stunning. And the Vikings are wearing their color rush. # kit watch, all purple with the yellow numbers. That's another beautiful kit. I couldn't find anything on the Giants or the Lions. Hopefully the Lions don't wear. They're all grey, which is
hopefully the Giants will wear the old school helmet.
It's magnificent, isn't it? Maybe wouldn't be great if the Pats wear their throwbacks as well, with the old school helmet with the Patriot in the offensive line pose. Thanksgiving throws up not only some interesting food, but some really great #KitWatch uniform matchups as well.
I'm a big fan of the Dolphins throwbacks where it's
Oh.
got the dolphin wearing a helmet, but
Fire.
the dolphin's helmet has an M on it, not a dolphin on it.
Yeah.
Which what I want is just infinite dolphins getting smaller and smaller and smaller on each helmet. He's not even a real Dolphins player. He's not even wearing the right helmet. It's ludicrous. I've just said.
Yeah.
By the way, I've just sent Zeke Elliott leaked the helmet for Thursday night on his Insta page and then quickly took it down. But of course, someone screenshotted it. That is stunning. I've just popped it in the WhatsApp group. That is a thing of beauty.
I've just popped that in there for you, Will. The ever decreasing dolphin. That's sort of. You see that.
Oh, that's amazing! Right,
Michael, oh my god, I love
got to post that with the video. That is absolutely brilliant.
I literally tweeted that the other day. Not this, but like a word volume, a word version of dolphin within a dolphin wearing a helmet. Yeah, it's mind blowing, really.
Dolphin within a dolphin sounds like a John Madden Thanksgiving meal, doesn't it? It's like a turducken. It's like a dolphin within a dolphin.
Would you eat
cutting it with his hand? And
would you eat dolphin?
Tuna?
No, well, tuna's not a dolphin, is it?
I'd eat tuna. I wouldn't eat dolphin.
It was in the 80s and 90s though. That's the problem.
Oh right, okay, one of those. Yeah. I'd try dolphin.
We all know you ate horse meat lasagnas, Ollie. Don't deny it.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why I get regular nosebleeds.
Oh, God.
But he could also run at the 3:30 at Sandown. Never do that again either.
Right, we all want to go watch the end of Mexico-Poland. So let's.
Yes. Oh, what's the score?
0-0. So let's wrap this thing up. Look, guys, Thanksgiving. We'll be across it on all of the Gridiron socials at Gridiron, at UK Gridiron on Instagram. You'll find us on TikTok as well. Myself and Ollie, certainly the invitation is open to Simon, although I know he's a busy, busy man. But myself and Ollie will certainly be on TalkSport 2 for the mid game of the 3, and I'll be doing the old ridiculous all-nighter again because apparently I just hate sleep. So we'll be there for all 3 games, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of Gridiron chat on there as well. Find us at Gridiron and at UK Gridiron. I did that bit already. I'm tired and need to go to bed, so I'll bid you all adieu. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Ollie. This has been the Gridiron Show.